Hello, there we go. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to our ARCC Faculty Artist Talk series. My name is Catherine Davis, and I'm an adjunct faculty here at the Art Department. Today, we are really pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Brady McLearen. Brady, through the use of mixed media, found object, and clay, really adopts and combines these industrial materials to create fantastic sculptural forms. Brady studied art, architecture, and design at the University of Minnesota from 2008 to 2011. In 2016, he received the Jerome Artist Grant awarded by the Northern Clay Center, and then became an artist in residence in the International Ceramic Research Center in Denmark. He completed his MFA graduate research at Alfred University in 2022, and is currently has a studio in Northeast Minneapolis. He is, of course, our 3D studio manager here at the Art Department at Anoka Ramsey. Would you all please give me a big round of applause for our first faculty lecturer, Brady McLearen.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Catherine, for the introduction. Thank you to everyone at Performing Arts and OIT for help making this event happen in this beautiful and open space. And thank you to Art Club for inviting me. It's a pleasure to speak about my work with you all. So can you get any feedback if everyone can hear me okay? Does this seem good? Okay. Yeah. All right, well, it's great to be here. I think this is an important time for this talk because, as you heard, I just finished my graduate program at Alfred University in New York, and I'm excited to share with you a bit of the path that led me to the work there, and some significant moments in the development of my work during that time. So it's truly an honor to have you all here, and thank you. So I was thinking that I wanted to encourage in you all to ask questions maybe as they arise. Maybe it can be a little bit more exciting, and so if you feel the need to interrupt me, please do. Or you can wait till the end, whatever you think. Was I being too quiet, Peter? Because this thing just got a little more touchy. Yeah. So let's begin. Peter, are you there? It's a little bit rainy. This is an early work from 2011. This is a single carved piece of wood with a ceramic handle that is bolted onto it. And so this is from a body of work that I called Origin of Meaning 2. And so at this time I was interested in architecture and learning that our constructions have meanings beyond their materials. And so I was very interested in the buttress that met the building in a way that made it look like it was flying. These are called the flying buttress. So they would remove all this material to maintain strength and elicit elegance. So that's what the holes are about. I was drilling a lot of holes and things in that similar thinking. So this is also the beginning of me listening to my materials and letting the work tell me what it wanted to be. So I was using some unorthodox approaches to clay, and I was taking carpentry tools to the clay walls and hole saws and spade bits. And so what I thought I was doing in drilling a hole, which these bits did so wonderfully, I suddenly had like hundreds of these clay coins because the process was spitting these coins out. And so this is like the beginning of that, like me not knowing where the work was going to lead my ideas. And so this piece is about timelessness and the eternal. And so in the studio, you're often working really hard and just thinking and sitting, looking at the materials, playing with the materials. And so as I was firing these clay coins, I found they had like a very beautiful sound. And so that, again, it was my interaction with the material and the process that kind of led me to this idea of a rattle and ideas behind that came about in this piece. And I became kind of aware of my sensibilities of the materials and their different properties and weights, and also their historical uses. And so this is Robert Irwin takes his fingers and he rubs them together like this. He says artists have a sensibility. And so I really, in this talk, being invited by Art Club, I kind of wanted to kind of express what it's like to be an artist and kind of owning that. And I was working with my hands, I was making things, I was measuring things, and I was thinking that I was discovering the secrets of the universe, which was a real valuable experience and a very real one. And I wasn't being told these things, you know. In making this piece and wanting to make a hexagon, in my interest in hexagons and their appearances in nature and architecture, I learned that every cut on the corner of this is a 60-degree cut. And the combination of angles in this object add up to 360 degrees. And so it's kind of consider the numbers and even the meaning beyond materials. And it was truths that I wasn't being told these things. They were kind of arriving to me through doing. And so this piece, this one's titled Origin of Meaning 1. And so though this came after the work you just saw, its inception was prior. And so this piece is inspired again by architecture and Greek and Roman columns. And so the diameter of this piece is 1/7 its height. And this is 7 hand-thrown pieces, 546 holes. Each piece was divided at its equator, and then the whole thing was reassembled with nuts and bolts. So this sort of tension and fragility there. And yeah, the energy that is sort of held in those numbers and those proportions are something that's sort of beyond me, and then I was using it in my work. So this is a video. The lighting is not as good. So when I turned this thing on, I was a bit stunned. I didn't know this wasn't part of the plan exactly, that this thing would become transparent. It's sort of flicker. And the directions, as we see on wheels on the highway, they sort of switch around. And this piece, yeah, nothing like that, is a pottery wheel masked in a skin of metal, turned on very slowly. So in making this piece, or should I say in finishing this piece, I learned that in the unknowing of my process to just move forward and trust my materials and my practice. And admit to it, the unknowing, I guess, yeah. So this is me flying through the air. In skateboarding, you need to have a vision. You sort of picture things in your mind. And the moment comes where this automatic process takes over, where you do the thing and sort of this natural intelligence and body intelligence starts, along with the environment, starts to take over. And so I always have this with me. And my practice was born in the pottery studio. Does this sound okay? Yes. Does anyone hear the ringing like I do?
It does ring.
It is a little bit. Thank you. I mean, can you hear me? Thank you. That's better. So my relationship with pottery is a bit complicated. But pottery for me is a context. And so when you have context, you become aware of it and its constraints and its limitations, and you can use that context to make new ideas. And you can honor that context or disturb it or walk along the edge of it. Maybe is a better term than disturb it. And so in the highest regard, I think of pottery in a similar respect to architecture. It has structure, function, beauty, and it's dictated by the scale and the proportion of the human body. Is the detail of that piece. So around 2014 now, I was working in an exhibitions gallery and thinking a lot about the pedestal and space and the space between things, and that they seem to be just as important as the things themselves. And so this is an install from the Fogelberg Fellowship that I was a part of around that time. And so all the work was built throughout that period, and it came time to install. And I was fortunate enough to be working there at the time, so I was able to sit in that space and work and install this work with an ample amount of time. And so this piece in the foreground came after. And so this is sort of, you see all the materials in the installation that the ceramic sits on. And so I wanted to sort of compress all that down, and I made that cube in front. So this thing contains like everything around it, and it's, for me, it becomes more than materials that make it up. And now at this point I'm sort of creating its own context, just like set the bounds of this place. And so this work was supported by I'm like tempted to just take the mic off and speak louder. This work was supported by the Drone Foundation in 2016. And so I had just traveled to Denmark. And I was doing some 3D printing there, clay 3D printing, and so I returned to culminate this grant period, and I didn't have a 3D printer. And I had a studio in a garage in Minneapolis, and I started working with plaster as a way to sort of exalt this process-based material, at least in a way that I was introduced to it. So these are all plaster pieces pigmented with carbonates, powdered carbonates, and colorants that you find in the ceramic studio. And so in the installation of this, I got excited that I was sort of calling attention to the entire establishment. The building was devoted to clay, and I had this show completely plastered. And so this piece is titled Brain with a BRANE. And so I was very interested in so it's very interested in science and quantum mechanics and learning and reading about these things. I sort of pictured this as a multi-dimensional object, like picturing myself as a little insect on here. I have orientation of up and down, left and right, forward and back, and then all of a sudden, if I'm abiding to those directions while I'm on it, there's like a fourth dimension that comes up, which is basically the Earth. See what my mom recognized. This is the Spring Meadow Dinnerware series from Corel. So the image is from Google. I grew up with these plates. They're sort of a felt memory for me. I know the weight of them and the size of them, and washed them plenty. And then below is the setup. When I arrived at Alfred, so this is all the work I brought from my basement studio at the time, and I just started where I was, and so coincidentally, with timing and this work, it was the first time. Can everyone hear me online? Can everyone hear me here? That's enough for that. Okay, I'm gonna speak a little louder now. All right, so this is the first time I started to look in at my own story. For me, it was a courageous move. Maybe it's not so, but and just thinking about what my relationship is to food, what my relationship is to my materials, and my own thoughts and my own history. And so that was the start of these pieces in looking at my own story. And so my first advisor was Megan Smythe. And so Megan walks into the space and she says, well, what you have here is a pottery workshop. And so she explained to me that sculpture studio is storage and tools over here and space. It's just nothing but space. And so this is that same corner 2 days later. And yeah, so setting up the studio was very automatic. And so with this foundational shift in like seeing what I'm doing before I start working, change my work significantly. And my awareness in my arms and my eyes, I was using this as a shelf and then it just got sucked in. And it's sort of balancing on some wet clay. It's in the corner, but it holds itself up. This is a quote I think about a lot. This is Marcel Duchamp. And he says, to all appearances, the artist acts like a mediumistic being who from the labyrinth beyond time and space seeks their way out to a clearing. So I thought it'd be a good idea to do my translation. As far as I can tell, an artist is a witch who from the furthest depths of the mind does the work to find what is true in themselves. And this was a serendipitous moment where I had taken a photo of myself in my favorite corner of my studio and learned Marcel was doing a similar thing on the cover of one of his books. And this is Kara Walker on the right, and on the left is one of my studio sketches. And so another quote that I love, and so Kara says, there's no diploma in the world that declares you as an artist. You can declare yourself an artist and then figure out how to be an artist. So this is kind of a hard one because it's incredibly hard work and it's very competitive, but it's true. Higher education provides a facility and resources, knowledge from various perspectives in the field, and a professional network, which is extremely supportive to making a life in the arts. But it's not a requirement to be one. It's self-assigned and you hold it. So as far as I can manage, I've adopted these things and made them part of my sensibility. So I left the studio and I went out. I found, and this is in New York State, and I found this trailer home. It was a home that looked like an excavator had just ripped it open. And it was horrific and it was strange. And there was all these manufactured materials all of a sudden like exposed. And so a lot of thoughts, I'm like, wow, excessive comfort is killing us. But for me, you know, these like pussy willows in front here, these growing plants. For me, this is natural. We are nature, and this is our hive. And so I scouted this site for colors and textures and materials. And when I got back to the studio, I was working right on the floor, and it was uncertain and uncomfortable. I didn't know what was going on, but I have given myself permission, and I made a declaration, and was liberated, and I was trusting in the process. And so on this self-assigned role, to the best of my ability, I was always trying to be aware and meditate on the present moment, you know, to pay attention to what was in front of me. And so what this means is sort of like reeling in not only what I see, but what I hear on the news, social, cultural context, and the state of things. And also like little spring flowers on my walk to the studio that are gonna get leveled by the lawnmower. You can't really see them, but those are in the back. That little white board is all my little flowers I was collecting at the time. And so it took me a while to realize this, but my work lives in a lyrical space. And so it's not necessarily about a theme I'm working with, but the feelings that I have about an idea. So this piece is titled Making Room or Herd Culture. And it's a sad piece. I was sad for my species and sad for the extinction of animals and anger and humility for the brutality against historic brutality against native cultures and home building and expansion and the uses of land. And so this is, the structure of this is inspired by like early 20th century constructivist sculpture, which is like mimicking, the urban modern industrial society. And it's kind of, I like that contradiction to do that in an animal form. And it's obviously this kind of deliberately small space without a roof. So this is Brancusi's piece on the right, and my piece with the same title on the left, Bird in Space. And so this also is an emotional response to my identity, my country, and my gender. And these are all pieces that were harvested from that site, modeled into a constructivist piece based on my own anatomy. And I put both these pieces up here because of the contrast that I'm in conversation I'm trying to have with art history, because this kind of fine bronze elite material, sort of upright and erect, and then I have like landfill like heading down. And so this is Jonathan Hopp, another advisor at Alfred, and we were talking about the materials, and I kind of became, I was depressed and surrounded. And we were discussing about the respect of the materials. And so, yeah, I mean, negativity is the enemy of creativity. So I brought clay back into the forefront of my studio. And so clay is a raw resource. It's a natural occurring material on our planet. Though we work with recipes, this is how I feel it and see it. And there's often no power tools needed for the manipulation of wet clay. Well, often until I start doing it. And the process is very peaceful and quiet and therapeutic. And I believe that clay is an ideal medium to see into the human experience, because it is immediately responsive or plastic. So plasticity is a counter term to elasticity, which pushes back like a rubber ball. And so when you give to clay, it receives, it records. And so what's otherwise formless, when you interact with it, it simply reflects information. It's the negative space. It's like the air all around us made solid. Clay also transforms and it transcends. It's a wonderful reminder. For me, the kiln is a time machine. In a similar way, the planet Earth is a time machine. Its weather and pressure ages our bodies. And so the same thing happens in a kiln. It's temperature and pressure. And I feel like I get to like witness and interact with geological time with the help of a kiln, which is. So at this time, you know, after the work you were just seeing, I would be working deep into the rhythms of my practice and the labor of my practice because clay is so clumsy, it's so heavy. And there's all this measuring, pouring, mixing, and lugging it around. And so I began to observe and notice the moments that were automatic and overlooked, and to preserve the beauty that I was seeing right where it was and just stop. You know, so this is a bin of clay that you know, I put it in the bin without thinking about how I was putting it in there. And so there's unconscious thinking in this, which is so like rare and so hard to see, capture. And so I became very interested in this idea of potential and what does incompleteness bring, and this idea of like the piece holding energy, potential energy. When I was 17 years old, my father had a stroke that impaired precisely half of his physical body and also his cognitive functioning. It was a very traumatic experience with the healthcare system, exchanges with family, as well as seeing him go through it. And so after the decline of his body and his mind, he died 10 years later. So in witnessing my father go through this and being by his side moments after his death, I vicariously went through like a visceral and you know, effectual, like a teaching about the brain as a mechanical device that needs blood and oxygen. And yet they say it also holds the intangible, the self and the thoughts and the feelings. But where are these things? And where is the energy really? So this head on the left is a mythological creature called the faun or the satyr. And these are their story is that they're the creatures of the forest that are known for being wild, untamed, and for their excessive sexual desires and overindulgences of wine. And so I acquired the faun as a stand-in for my father and also me. And this piece can go many ways. But for me, it was an exercise to understand and make physical certain parts of my mind and remove them. The piece might be asking, like, what is the conditioning of me no longer serving me? What can I unlearn? So it's this kind of this sterile, I mean, it's unfired porcelain, articulated figure with a big gash in its head and drifting away as this sort of like vital, colorful, rich and heavy glaze. Yeah, and so I was using clay in my mind, I was thinking of this as the free association of thoughts or part of the mind. And clay is pretty ideal for that, being that it's so amorphous and thousands, millions of particles, complex. So I was just kind of looking at this separation of the body and mind. And this is like a tiny walnut brain of unfired porcelain, and the porcelain itself, the way I was using it, it sort of cracks on that. The behavior of the clay sort of produced this work. Me and the clay did this together. And so this is part of a body of work that I was calling Waiting Room, and thinking about the harsh division of these two realms in our culture, and thinking about clinical care and Western medicine. So I had these two chairs presenting those, thinking about Joseph Beuys and his fat chair. I was so excited to have like a chair as part of my piece. So I'm looking at this like wildly dumb and massive, beautiful thing, and like, what is this gray matter? And it's all folded together. And is the physical and the psychological really separate, or is modern Western philosophy just leading us to believe so? I was coming aware that philosophy is the creation of concepts, and it's the foundation of how I see the world. And I know the ancient Vedic scientists have known it all along, but I was kind of starting to get on board. And so this is that grouping in the waiting room installation. So could have been many books. I wanted to come to close with a book. This one I found traveling in some strange, highly occupied, thrift store. And me and this book found each other, coming of age in the Milky Way. So this is the story of how we became aware of that what's out there never ends. And that this is kind of new relatively to our awareness. And so this is kind of still what I'm turning over, and it became apparent to me that it'd be kind of foolish, or it's more common sense to think that I am not the origin of anything. And that within each of us is the infinite and the eternal. And the eye looks like a black hole. So so this is like a combination of looking out, looking up, and looking in. I have like a meditation practice now, and been getting used to like quiet and nothingness. And yeah, I was listening to some David Lynch, and he mentioned in the 60s there was this group that was raising consciousness, and he said they weren't raising consciousness, they were raising information. And so I really respect that. It's a little bit more tangible. So this piece is titled "The Fog or the Space Around the Head," and it's extremely massive, thick, heavy thing that a human head fits in, and it's sort of resting and looking up. And so I just wanted to end with this piece and open it up to any questions if anyone has any. Well, thanks. Go ahead. I can't see much.
How important is your work from a standpoint of it being something that you have versus something that someone else has, and why would someone else? What do you think motivates you to come and seek your work out?
I'd say that it's a bit of a sort of a leap of faith in that sense. You know, it's like I put this event on and I just have to at one point just like let it happen. I can control as much as I can, and then it just happens. So in the work, there's something called marketing. That is what this is. That is what I'm doing now in a sense. And yeah, you know, it's very alluring to make pottery. Everyone around, or I don't want to make it about pottery, but you know, what's commodifiable? What can I'm so fortunate to have a job that I love so much here. And so I just gotta
Well, you do your work for you. Is really the key.
It's the key.
Doing it for one to, because a lot of here, some of the work here is not permanent in nature. I'm tired of clay, things of that nature. I guess I'm wondering what happens after it's made and immediately and then 10 years down the road. Is that important?
Yeah, it's very important. I've been heartbroken at pieces that are ephemeral where I didn't intend them to be. And you do what you can with what you have. I store as much as I can, and I try and make people aware of it. That's about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James.
So a lot of your work kind of seems to make it's very meaningful to you, makes a lot of sense to you. Are you ever worried that when you're showing this work to other people, they might not get like the same meaning that you're getting out of it? Or are you just happy as long as it makes sense to you, or you're happy with your interpretations?
I'm the latter. I mean, their own interpretations is more information for me. I was very excited that to let Catherine see the work and say what she saw, you know, because that's just more for me, you know, to use and know about. But yeah, it's these are the most, they always work on you. So I try not to. It's not so easy to not worry about what other people think. Thank you. You can just speak, Dominic, go ahead.
So the piece with the crumple on,
Hmm.
did that, was there any inspiration from Ozymandias? It has a lot of the same feeling.
What's the reference? No, I don't know that.
It's a poem.
Ooh. No, I'll have to look it up. You have to tell me that name. No, I'm only just learning how to approach poetry. Wondering what they're doing. That's where I got that word lyrical. there was this book I was reading called Don't Read Poetry. And that was a category. Lyrical is grounded in like emotions. Experience.
So I'm doing a lot of the focus in the work is on thinking of the concepts that you're like focusing on at the time. But then another part of it is really focused on the material, and letting it kind of guide you through the process and then speak for itself in addition to working with it. Do you find that you're more drawn to expressing conceptual or expressing material more, like more drawn to other, or do you kind of put together?
You answered it as well at the end. It's like pull it together. I mean, what am I feeling in this moment? Yeah, because the materials are like company. They I might not have inspiration in me as I try and channel. And so it's definitely both. Yeah, go ahead.
Which one working first?
That'd be the doing. That'd be the body, not the not thinking. I mean, that's what my impulse was to answer to you anyway. And so that's the permission. That's like just or sitting in a chair. I mean, that might be the conceptual process. So if I move I think better with my hands are moving. So, and again, I'm not sure they're so separate. Yeah.
What recommendation would you give someone starting out?
In the arts, starting out.
Yeah.
James, you have to wait. In the back. Favorite part of using specifically clay, you said? Well, the reflection, like I was saying, yeah, that it captures that it's plastic. I mean, yeah. Were you here for that slide? I feel like I let it all out. So, and it's quiet, and it's clumsy, and it's formless, and it has many different states. It can be powder, it can be mud, it can be firm, and it's complex. And then as soon as you're thinking about form, then you realize you can get into chemistry and temperature, and it's just like never ending. It's wonderful. Yeah.
So looking at a lot of your work, it seems like it's fairly large, like portion size or bigger. Like, how does like the scale of your work impact how you interpret like your own work, or like what's important about the size of your work to you?
Yeah, good question. It's like the gamut. I want to know what it's like. And this is some of what you saw was my first interaction with a piece that I was walking around. And so after that, I'm like, God, I just want to work on some tiny thing with detail, you know? But yeah, along the lines of pottery and architecture, I think there's a moment, well, even with the small stuff with pottery, it responds to our hands, the size of our hands. And this is like the size of our head. And so I'm not sure that answers your question.
So thank you.
Yeah. What is you? We're almost there. Okay, a couple more. Calvin?
Yeah, art movements are often named after the captain.
by people in the future. Just a simple question. What art movement will your work be influenced?
You're so creative. That was good. I'm not an art historian, Calvin. I just like, I hope to not pin it down.
But try.
You know, abstract expressionist is like popped into my head because of the emotion and the disassociation with our familiar space. That's where I like to be. I like to know something I haven't seen before. Yeah. But I don't think I can invent a name of a future art movement for you, which is, we'll have to talk later. James. I think I was, you know, I have a lot of doubt in myself too. So overcoming doubt, choosing your story, knowing that you're not your thoughts, you're not your parents, you're not your conditioning, and giving yourself permission to fuck around and love what you're doing without being distorted by things that aren't part of it. For artists starting out, you asked about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your waiting piece, did you choose the chairs just because like the chairs that you had? Or did you choose them intentionally? Did you build them? I like the piece, but I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much up to this point. I use what I can get. So those were two chairs that sort of set a different mood for me. I found I wanted a contrast in each of them, and I think, yeah, so I like borrowed those from particular rooms in which they played their role. Yeah. Any others? Anybody? Okay, I wish I didn't have to pick. Okay, go ahead. The artists that I showed are very inspiring to me, and I've been looking and listening to Agnes Martin. Do I have that right? Rachel? She's, yeah, like really muted colors. She says like musicians can have pure emotion and artists have to explain everything. And then like, you know, in ceramics, Ron Nagel has a sensitivity with color and texture that is just hyper. It's so good. And you know, I just want that on my wall. Like, who do I? They sort of they whiz around. They come in and out. Yeah. Well, I think Dominic, you want to do one more?
I was wondering about so there, sort of the feel of your work changed over the years, but a lot of the earlier work was about form, structure, and mathematics. And then a lot of the later work is more ethereal. And I was wondering if you done a lot of experimentation with like combining the two, where you have like imposing order on the ethereal, or life growing out of the lines, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, I can see your interests in your questions, and I love that because yeah, I was sort of, lack of better term, sort of worshiping the grid and the what was his name? And the sciences of mathematics, and then I learned that everything started to kind of crumble underneath me, and I appreciate both, and to combine them is like the context, the play of context that I like, that it would. It's showing that they're both here. That's a great thing. Yeah. Does that work? Okay, thank you everyone so much.